A white student believed it would be amusing to shear a black student's hair in front of onlookers, but the reserved new student he targeted proved to possess a unique form of resilience. 13-year-old Tyrese Reddick requested little when he entered Crest Hill Middle School that Monday morning in Thousand Oaks, California. He carried his backpack, a well-used spiral notebook, and the same lunchbox he'd been using since 5th grade. His mom had written a brief message inside, as she always did, "Be yourself." That was sufficient. Tyrese felt no nervousness. He's experienced being the new student previously. 3 schools within the past 5 years, a consequence of his dad's work assisting military veterans transition to civilian life. This one didn't seem significantly different. Bright hallways, worn lockers, that familiar scratchy intercom crackle each morning. However, even before second period, he could sense the nature of this place. Students observed him. Not everyone, but a noticeable number. The long locks, carefully twisted and pulled back, distinguished him. He carried himself with quiet confidence. He avoided ostentation, opting for a simple style, clean sneakers, a tucked-in shirt, and earbuds during the bus ride. Yet, his presence was noted. In Mrs. Lamar's history class, a girl with freckles whispered, "Your hair's cool." He responded with a small, appreciative nod, but remained silent. Afterward, in the cafeteria, he located an unoccupied table close to the vending machine. He was comfortable with solitude. He enjoyed watching initially, noting who laughed excessively, who moved in groups, who acted differently than they truly were. A definite pattern existed. Crest Hill operated with unwritten guidelines. There were the drama students, the sports teams, those who wore costly hoodies and spoke as if they were online personalities. And then there were those who maintained order, deciding who held significance. He noticed one of them before the 6th period began. He was tall, blonde, and boisterous, conversing with a group by the lockers, and they were all laughing excessively at something. Therese hadn't learned the boy's name yet, but he observed how other students either displayed overly enthusiastic smiles around him or avoided eye contact. Individuals of that nature were consistently the same, those who required an audience. Therese continued walking. Upon arriving home that afternoon, he placed his bag near the kitchen door. His mother was preparing red beans and rice, humming softly. "How was your first day?" she asked without turning from the stove. He shrugged. "Same as usual." "Did you make any friends?" she inquired. "Not yet." His father, seated at the table in a pressed polo, looked up from his tablet. "Are people staring?" he asked. Therese paused. "Don't hesitate to address it," his dad said, his voice even. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, but you also won't allow them to take advantage of you. Do you understand?" Therese nodded. "Yeah. You're not attending that school simply to endure it. You are there to command your presence, silent if you desire, vocal if you select, but never allow anyone to define you based on their assumptions." His dad expressed himself in that manner often, not through formal talks, but through subtle guidance, valuable insights woven into the aroma of coffee or while tending to his boots in the garage. Therese paid close attention. He consistently listened. The following morning, as he secured his hair back in the mirror, he reflected on his father's words. He didn't need to create a disturbance. He simply needed to be dependable. However, even dependability couldn't prevent a storm from developing. Within the first week, Therese understood the social dynamics well. Crest Hill wasn't overtly unfriendly, but it had its nuances, those subtle cues that revealed the power structure. And centrally positioned within that was Brent Granger. Brent wasn't the largest student, but he carried himself as if he were. His dad owned and operated Granger Buick GMC, a car dealership located off the main highway, and it was well known throughout town. He habitually wore his hoodie halfway off his shoulders, kept his socks pulled up high, and had a knack for transforming every classroom into his own personal game show. Teachers put up with him. Students either adored him or actively avoided eye contact. There was no middle ground. Tyrese understood this perfectly. Brent wasn't seeking popularity. He wanted to be feared, admired, and followed. He had cultivated this reputation through a deliberate strategy, employing boisterous jokes, harsh nicknames, and ensuring he had an audience whenever he criticized someone. On Wednesday, Tyrese passed the outdoor basketball court during lunch. Brent was present with his group, Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick, all 8th graders, all known for being loud. Chadwick noticed Tyrese first. "Yo, new kid, do you play?" he yelled, spinning a ball on his finger. Tyrese continued walking, his earbuds in. Brent gave a smirk. Was he really spending that much time on his hair? The others chuckled. Tyrese remained unfazed. However, he registered every comment. Later that day, Logan brushed against him in the hallway. "Oops," he stated matter-of-factly, without acknowledging him. It wasn't accidental, it was a challenge. That night, Tyrese sat on the back porch with his dad, an ice pack on his knee. He'd received a hard elbow during PE basketball. It was the same group. Insufficient for a formal report, but enough to send a message. His dad looked at him, but remained silent initially. "I'm good," Tyrese stated. "I know you are," his father responded. "But being good isn't the same as being ready." Ready for what? Tyrese pondered. He didn't desire to be the angry child. He didn't want to be a target, either. He simply wanted to be left undisturbed. However, individuals like Brent tend to recognize those who are reserved. They test and provoke, anticipating a vulnerability. And Tyrese? He remained steadfast. He was carefully considering his actions. Friday arrived. It was gym class time. The locker room before the bell consistently held a peculiar atmosphere, a combination of boisterous energy and the scent of deodorant. Tyrese was securing his shoelaces when Brent entered late, holding a pair of scissors. "New kid?" Brent called out across the room. "Did your mom forget to give you a haircut?" Tyrese remained silent, continuing to tie his shoes. "Man, you're sporting a whole jungle on your head." Several students laughed. A few appeared awkward, but offered no comment. Then Brent approached. He held the scissors in one hand, mimicking a playful gesture, waving them around. "Just saying, bro, you'd probably make a whole wig with what you got." Tyrese finally looked up, maintaining a calm demeanor, his eyes steady. He appeared neither scared nor angry, but completely focused. "You good?" Tyrese asked, his voice low. Brent blinked. "What?" I said, "Are you good?" Brent stared at him, momentarily disoriented. "You talk now," he snapped, attempting to regain his composure. "Man, whatever." He turned and left, discarding the scissors into a locker as if they held no significance. Yet, Tyrese understood the gesture. It was a display of dominance, a deliberate act. Brent, however, was unprepared for the consequences when the pretense ended. By the start of the second week, a change was palpable. It wasn't overt, nothing that could be documented in an official reprimand. Still, Tyrese sensed it. Entering class, he noticed subtle looks. Not fear, not interest, simply observation. A posture of expectation, as if everyone anticipated a confrontation. He preferred to avoid entanglement. Within Mr. Delano's science lab, he heard a student whisper, "That's the person Brent is involved with." During lunchtime, another student subtly shifted their tray when Tyrese took a seat at the table's end. He remained composed, neither adjusting his position nor expressing any reaction. He simply ate more slowly. One afternoon, while on his way to the library, a 7th grader, a slender boy with braces, approached him near the vending machines. "Hey," the boy said, slightly winded, "are you Tyrese?" Tyrese looked over. He cautioned, "Just, be careful around Brent. He's been speaking about you. Said he intends to make a statement." Tyrese questioned that. "A point?" His companion confirmed, "Yes. He says you believe you're superior to everyone. He's planning to correct you." The young man paused before adding, "He did something to a 6th grader last year. He poured a milkshake on his head during lunch." Everyone laughed. It was quite disturbing. Tyrese acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you." The boy appeared to want to add something, but someone called his name, and he ran off. That evening, Tyrese lay on the living room rug, feet resting on the couch, looking at his phone. His mom was close by, checking papers. "Something on your mind?" she asked without looking up. He hesitated. "Have you ever had someone harass you just to see you react?" She set down her pen and turned to him. "You mean like bullying?" "I mean like they notice you don't join their games, so they force you into one." She paused, allowing the words to linger. I've encountered individuals like that before, she remarked. In college, even during my first teaching job, some people struggle to grasp peace unless it aligns with their expectations. He responded, you maintain your principles. You acknowledge your identity, and you refuse to allow others to compromise your stability. He nodded in agreement. His father entered the room, wiping his hands with a towel. Do you wish to speak with me? He inquired directly. Tyrese observed them both, then straightened up. I thought, his dad said, settling into the chair opposite him. Is that the boisterous one? Yes. What is he doing? Nothing yet. Just comments. Bumping into me. Talking as if he's seeking a reaction. Is it effective? Tyrese shook his head. No, but it's becoming tiresome. His father leaned forward. Let me tell you something, he said. The world is full of kids like Brent. It doesn't matter if you're 13 or 30. Some of them have loud voices. Some wear uniforms. Some hide behind keyboards. They all behave similarly. They test and challenge you, attempting to provoke a reaction, either a rash response or retreat, he indicated by tapping his finger on the coffee table. You refrain from either action. You remain composed until they acknowledge they're confronting an unexpected challenge. Tyrese looked at him. Can I strike him? He inquired. If necessary, his dad replied, but not fueled by anger. Never out of anger. You strike to halt the behavior, not to dominate. His mother remained silent, but offered no disagreement either. The following day, Brent passed Tyrese in the hallway and bumped his books from his hand. The papers spread out, fluttering across the tile. Brent smiled, a seemingly accidental gesture. Tyrese bent down, gathering them up individually. Several students paused to observe. Others looked away. Brent remained, waiting. When Tyrese straightened, he remained silent. He simply stared, a prolonged gaze that made Brent blink. What? Tyrese spoke, his tone even, just enough to convey, I see you. I am not afraid of you, and I am not responding as you instructed. Brent's smile disappeared. However, some individuals require explicit clarification, detailed step by step. It was gym day once again, and the locker room was filled with typical middle school activity. Sneakers scraping against the floor, lockers banging, the sound of inexpensive deodorant spraying permeating the space. Tyrese consistently prepared quickly. He entered and exited swiftly, avoiding conversation, showing off, or joking. He approached it as a task. When he entered, Brent was already present, seated on the bench as if expecting someone. It seemed he was the observer now. Tyrese remained composed, located his locker, entered the combination, and concentrated on changing. He sensed eyes on him, not just Brent's, but others as well. Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick. Even some students who typically stayed out of things. Yo, Brent said, rising deliberately. You still rocking those spaghetti ropes on your head? A faint sound, like laughter, rippled through the room, but it lacked strength, as if even amusement had become weary. Tyrese concentrated on his shoes, securing the laces firmly. Brent approached. He retrieved an object from his pocket. Scissors, silver, sharp, and genuine, likely taken from an art class or workshop. Have you ever considered change? Brent inquired, manipulating the scissors with 2 fingers as if they were a plaything. It could tidy you up. You might actually appear normal. Tyrese raised his gaze, his face blank, without a flicker of movement. Brent smiled. Before anyone could intervene, he reached out and cut. A moment of dread. The cut was clean at the base. It fell to the floor like a fallen leaf. Several children gasped. One whispered, yo. For a brief instant, everything paused. Tyrese rose, steadily, without haste, without hesitation. His expression remained unchanged, but something shifted behind his eyes. He looked down at the dread on the floor. Then he looked up at Brent. You think this is amusing? He asked. Brent smirked, slightly. Tyrese did not shout. He did not lash out. He advanced, composed, deliberate, and struck Brent with a quick elbow to the chest. Brent recoiled, astonished, gasping. Before he could respond, Tyrese intervened once more. Rotation, sweep, ascent. Brent fell heavily to the ground, without flourish, without ostentation. Simply efficient motion. His father had instructed him in that. Accuracy, not force. Brent attempted to rise. Tyrese positioned a knee on his chest and moved in close. "You do not touch me again," he stated. Voice even. Never. The room was utterly silent. It was documented. Naturally, Coach Timmons entered the room just 2 seconds afterward. Tyrese signaled, using a whistle as if they were on a football field. "Hey, what's happening?" Tyrese retreated. Brent was on the floor, one hand pressed to his ribs, the other still holding the scissors. Coach addressed both boys. "Office now." The journey to the principal's office was quiet. Tyrese remained silent. Brent attempted to portray himself as the injured party, murmuring about his intentions and claiming it was merely a joke, his hands visibly shaking. Principal Rossner observed them, her expression stern behind her square glasses. "Begin speaking," she instructed. Brent spoke first, attributing the incident to Tyrese, asserting that he reacted inexplicably and it was a misunderstanding. Tyrese remained silent, patiently waiting. Subsequently, he retrieved an item from his pocket and placed it on the desk, a cut dread. He maintained direct eye contact with Principal Rossner. "He brought scissors to school." Rossner blinked as he cut my hair. Her face remained still, though her eyes shifted. She then turned to Brent. "Is that true?" Brent stammered. "It was a joke. I wasn't going to actually—" "You cut his hair?" No response was given. "I want your parents here." "Now." Coach Timmons stood behind them, arms crossed, silent. 20 minutes later, Tyrese's mom arrived, entering calmly but with firmness. She sat next to her son, placed a hand on his shoulder, and looked the principal directly in the face. "Before we say a word," she stated, "I want to know if you all understand what this means." Rossner exhaled slowly. "We're handling it." "You better." But the truth was, this wasn't just a school issue anymore. It was bigger, and it wasn't going away quietly. By that evening, the video had already started making its rounds. It wasn't a long clip, just 10 seconds, but it showed everything. Brent moved forward with scissors. Tyrese advanced, executing a takedown. Following that, there was a close-up shot of Tyrese leaning in, appearing composed and resolute. The quietness in the locker room spoke volumes. The incident spread through group chats and Instagram stories. Even a few students from Northwood High School shared it with captions such as "He messed with the wrong one," and "Brent got folded." Tyrese made no posts about it. He offered no comments. He felt no need to. His parents were seated at the kitchen table, facing Principal Rossner and Brent's parents, Dean and Colleen Granger. Dean was wearing an expensive watch and a blazer with jeans. Colleen had sunglasses resting on her head, as if she had just left a country club brunch. "Let's be clear," Dean stated, attempting to take charge of the discussion. "Our son made a mistake, but it was simply a prank. Boys his age do not always grasp boundaries. Cutting someone's hair is assault." Tyrese's mother responded, her tone sharp. "Not a prank." Dean questioned the situation. Tyrese's dad moved closer. "Let me explain, man. I served in the Marines. I've led squads in countries you couldn't find on a map. You know what isn't tolerated, regardless of location? Disrespect, particularly when it's masked with explanations." Colleen moved in her seat. "We're just suggesting that maybe your son reacted excessively." Tyrese's mom slowly turned toward her. "Repeat that." "I'm just saying. Perhaps a less forceful approach would have been preferable." Brent did not inflict any physical harm. "Cutting a child's hair without permission is a humiliating act," Rossner finally stated. "Regardless of Brent's intentions, the effect is the same. And if it had been your son's hair, Mrs. Granger, I doubt you'd view it as humorous," Dean said, folding his arms. "So what's the next step? Will Brent be suspended?" "He's suspended for 10 days, Rossner replied directly. "And, subject to the school board's review, we might consider a longer suspension," Dean remarked. Regarding the incident, Rossner stated it was about bringing a weapon into the school, targeting another student, and provoking violence, not over a haircut. Tyrese remained silent throughout the entire discussion, his hands in his lap and his posture upright. He displayed no signs of gloating or smirking. Outside the room, several students observed through the glass door. News of the event had quickly circulated. The following day at school, Tyrese walked the hallway as he typically did, but a noticeable change was present. Some students acknowledged him with nods. Several people simply moved aside to let him pass. A seventh grader approached and exclaimed, "Yo, that thing you did was crazy." Tyrese continued walking. He had no desire for attention and just wanted to get to class. During math, Logan and Chadwick remained silent, offering no jokes or taunts. Brent's group had dispersed. Lacking their leader, they didn't behave as they usually did. Tyrese took his seat, retrieved his pencil, and began his assignment. That afternoon, as Tyrese left school, a teacher he hadn't known well approached him by the parking lot. "Are you okay?" Tyrese nodded. "I just want you to know what you did. How you handled that. It took strength, not just in the moment, but the way you've carried yourself afterward." "Thanks," Tyrese said. "I'm just trying to keep it steady." The teacher smiled. "That's harder than it looks." But respect earned through silence doesn't fade easily, and Brent was beginning to learn that the hard way. Brent's 10-day suspension felt lengthy for all except him. As he remained at home, restricted and disheartened, the school continued. He had anticipated students would support him, perhaps dismissing the situation as they typically did. However, a shift occurred. Students weren't simply avoiding him. They were discussing him. Murmurs in the hallways, uncomfortable pauses in group chats, videos circulated with captions such as "not so tough now" or "play stupid games." Brent's reputation suffered a significant blow. It fractured. Tyrese continued to be consistently present. Headphones on, locker tidy, assignments completed punctually. He avoided any displays of arrogance or a triumphant demeanor. However, his presence felt more substantial now. Not intimidating, simply resolute, as if he was unyielding. The following week, the school arranged a facilitated meeting between the families. An opportunity to discuss the incident and, at least from the district's perspective, reinstate a conducive learning atmosphere. Tyrese was reluctant to attend. His parents advised him, sometimes the most impactful action is simply being present. And that's what he did. They convened in the counselor's office. It was a small room with a circle of chairs that didn't match. Brent entered with a tense neck and a wounded sense of self. He avoided eye contact with Tyrese. His mother appeared more irritated than regretful. His father wore the familiar smirk, as if he were attending out of duty, not thought. Ms. Harrell, the school counselor, inhaled deeply. "We're not here to revisit what occurred. Our intention is to allow everyone the opportunity to share their feelings and discuss how we can proceed." She addressed Brent. "Would you like to start?" Brent adjusted in his chair. "I was simply joking around. There was no intention behind it." Tyrese remained silent. Brent continued, "I didn't realize it would be such a significant issue." Tyrese's mom raised an eyebrow. She stated that cutting a boy's hair is a deeply personal act, particularly when that hair symbolizes something beyond mere appearance. Brent mumbled, "I wasn't aware of that." Tyrese's father stated, "You didn't care to know." "That's the difference." Ms. Harrell then addressed Tyrese, asking, "Would you like to say something?" Tyrese looked up, making eye contact with Brent for the first time in the room. "I didn't come here to fight," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to make friends either. I came here to get through school." Regarding his hair, he added, "That's my business. It's part of me. You touched it like it was yours to joke about." Brent shifted in his seat, remaining silent. "I didn't strike you due to a loss of control," Tyrese explained. "I struck you because you needed to grasp a certain point, and verbal communication wasn't effective." A pause settled over the room. Brent's mother then addressed the group. "We have discussed boundaries with him." "Have we, Brent?" Brent responded with a restrained nod. "Yes." Ms. Harrell added, "Occasionally, consequences provide more valuable lessons than spoken words." She then turned toward Tyrese. "Are you satisfied with the current situation?" Tyrese gave a slight shrug. "I do not require an apology." Brent raised his head. "I do apologize, however." Tyrese observed him, not with the intention of causing Brent discomfort, but to understand his delivery. Frankly, Tyrese didn't detect much substance behind the words. "Okay," Tyrese stated finally. "Then carry it." "Carry what?" Brent asked, puzzled. "The apology? The lesson?" The understanding that not everyone will permit you to belittle them and dismiss it with laughter. Tyrese rose. That's all I needed to say. His parents followed him from the room. In the hallway, his father placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't fight in that room, he said, but you still reacted. He continued, but the thing about true strength? It doesn't manifest in punches. It shows up in how you choose to leave. A week later, Crest Hill Middle held a school-wide assembly. Officially, the assembly was about respect and accountability, but everyone understood what caused it. Even teachers were discussing the incident in the break room, though no one voiced it directly. A palpable restlessness filled the gym as students, anticipating a standard presentation and hollow words, grew bored. Then, Principal Rossner took a surprising action. She approached the front without a microphone, relying solely on her voice and a confident stride. We're facing a recent event that has prompted us to reflect, she stated, and the room fell silent. I'm not going to repeat the details of what occurred. My purpose is to discuss the underlying causes and chart a course for moving ahead. She refrained from mentioning any individuals. It wasn't necessary. She emphasized, this school is not a place where power is gained through popularity or intimidation. Respect isn't earned by volume or the number of laughs you receive. It's earned through how you treat others. Even when no one was observing, a few students glanced around, some shifted uncomfortably, but others remained focused. Listening. Tyrese was seated near the back. He didn't withdraw. He didn't exaggerate his presence, either. He simply maintained the posture he now adopted as he walked through the hallways, balanced and steady. Following the assembly, several students approached him. You all right, man? One student inquired. Yeah, Tyrese responded. You handled that situation differently than I would have, another student observed. Tyrese simply shrugged. A sense of silent acknowledgement began to replace the previous laughter. Even the faculty noticed. Mr. Delano stopped him following science class and remarked, I hope you're proud of how you conducted yourself. Tyrese smiled and replied, I'm just trying to be steady. The significant event occurred a few days later during art class. Miss Ruiz gave the class a project exploring identity, focusing on self-perception and external perception. She indicated the project could take any form, such as a painting, sculpture, or even a college application. Tyrese created a painting, a portrait of a boy with locks, cropped, and one missing. The depiction wasn't conveying sadness or anger, but rather portraying the boy standing tall amidst a storm, with other figures indistinct in the background. When he shared his work, the class fell silent. I created this, he stated, because occasionally people fail to understand how profoundly something seemingly insignificant can matter. They dismiss it as mere hair or a simple joke, but it holds deeper meaning. It's about what it symbolizes. The room was silent. Miss Ruiz's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. She simply nodded. That day, after school, Brent walked past him in the hallway, unaccompanied, without his usual entourage or any commotion. He offered a brief glance. Not an apology, not a confrontation, just recognition. Tyrese nodded once. Nothing further. It wasn't a close bond, but it was a respectful separation. Returning home that evening, his mom was preparing sweet potatoes in the kitchen. Did the art project go well? She inquired. Better than well, he replied. His dad entered from the garage. Did you receive a response regarding your student council essay? His father asked. Yes, Tyrese confirmed, smiling. You're accepted, his father said, pleased. Calmly, proudly. You deserve that, he said. Afterward, as Tyrese prepared for bed, he gazed into the mirror. One section remained noticeably shorter than the others. He hadn't corrected it. He chose to do it this way, not because he lacked the ability, but because it wasn't necessary. It served as a reminder of the challenges he had already overcome, of what didn't break him, of who he was before, during, and after the storm. Because some conflicts aren't about achieving victory. They're about ensuring the subsequent one doesn't unfold in a similar fashion. If this account resonated with you, evoked an emotion, please share it. A lesson can be found within, and perhaps someone in your circle needs to hear it. Join our mailing list for more stories that speak truth, challenge disrespect, and remind us all what quiet strength truly embodies. Two adult men were laughing at a young woman attempting to work out. The gym was full, but no one intervened. That is until Terrence spoke up and caused everyone to stop ignoring the situation. The familiar scent of sweat and rubber filled the air. Dumbbells made a clunking sound, treadmills vibrated, and a few early gym goers strained through their exercises with headphones on. It was a little after 7 a.m. at Ironworks Fitness in Knoxville, Tennessee. A typical Tuesday for many, but for Terrence Roy, it was leg day. Leg day held a special significance. He was finishing up wiping down the leg press when he noticed her. She appeared to be no older than 25. She had a tall, athletic build, her hair pulled back, and looked slightly out of place, as if it were her first week at that gym. She lingered near the squat rack, clearly attempting to adjust the bar. This wasn't uncommon. Everyone begins somewhere. However, he then observed something else. Two men, likely in their mid to late 30s, white, wearing compression shirts that seemed unnecessary and displaying an unwarranted confidence. They were not exercising. They simply stood, resting on the preacher curl bench, observing her. Initially, the sounds were quiet, hushed whispers and slight chuckles. Then, one of them spoke, his voice carrying enough for many in the gym to hear. "Hey, sweetheart, that bar's heavier than you. Are you certain you don't need assistance?" The other responded with a loud, distinct laugh. She likely saw it on TikTok and believed she could simply enter and lift as a professional. Terrence paused, towel still in hand. His body tightened. He recognized that tone, sarcastic, yet with an underlying negativity. A combination of mockery and a sense of privilege. The kind that diminishes you without physical confrontation. The woman remained silent, continuously adjusting the bar, her gaze fixed forward. A subtle tremor ran through her hands. She inhaled deeply, as if suppressing something. Terrence surveyed the room. Approximately 15 people were present. Some had overheard something. He observed this by their reactions. A man wearing a red hoodie glanced at his phone, feigning disinterest. A woman near the ellipticals seemed uneasy, but remained silent. There was no movement, no vocalization. He settled onto a nearby bench, observing for a moment longer. Then, the realization struck him. This was bigger than just those two individuals and their inappropriate remarks. It concerned everyone present, including him, as they observed the event unfold and remained silent. Such incidents hadn't been uncommon in a location like this before. However, it may have been the first instance he found impossible to overlook. He rose deliberately, secured his water bottle, and approached. "Hey," he stated, his voice composed yet resolute. The two men turned. One displayed a smirk. "Talking to us?" The taller one questioned, raising his eyebrows. Terrence affirmed. "Do you find it amusing to harass someone while she's attempting to train?" The shorter one shrugged. "Relax, man. We were just joking," he said. "She didn't laugh," Terrence said, shifting his gaze towards the woman. She shook her head, softly. Several heads now turned. A man pausing between sets looked up. A staff member behind the counter moved closer, listening. The taller man folded his arms. "Your father or something?" he asked. "No, terrible. Just someone who's tired of people thinking this kind of thing is acceptable." A silence descended, thick and tense, yet he remained still. "Look, man," the shorter one began, his earlier confidence diminished. "We didn't intend any harm." Terrence acknowledged, "Yeah, that's the issue," but the room remained unresponsive. He sensed an underlying tension, a peculiar quietness born of people feigning ignorance of what they had clearly heard. A palpable tension filled the room, as if everyone was holding their breath, anticipating how much further it would escalate before someone intervened. That's the feeling at Ironworks. Terrence remained still, and so did the two men. The taller man, identified as Kyle by his bright blue gym badge, still wore a tight smirk, though his arms were now folded across his chest, a less overtly confident posture. The shorter man, Bryce, had taken a step back, as if uncertain if a confrontation was imminent. Terrence was not present to engage in a physical altercation. He didn't need to. His mere presence conveyed authority. And for a man like him, 40 years old, with 2 children and 2 decades of maintaining composure in tense situations, he had learned that sometimes remaining still could be the most impactful action. But he also observed something else. Still, few people intervened. Some glanced up, then looked back down as if they had mistakenly chosen the wrong performance and wished to change channels. Others appeared uneasy, seemingly hoping he would cease and move on, and it stung him. Not because he anticipated assistance, but because he understood how readily people could retreat behind their earbuds or phone screens when situations became complex. One man, likely in his mid-50s, sat on a bench pressing dumbbells. He shook his head, not at Kyle or Bryce, but at Terrence, as if he were the issue, as if speaking out was more troubling than the inappropriate comments being made initially. The young woman, who had been silent, now sat on the edge of the squat rack platform, pretending to tie her shoe, even though it was already secure. It was a way to keep occupied, a way to avoid looking at anyone. She wished she wasn't involved in this situation, but she already was. Terrence took a deliberate breath. He angled himself, just enough so his voice would reach everyone. You all heard what they said, and you observed how she reacted. He spoke, not yelling, but ensuring his voice carried throughout the room. If someone addressed your sister, your daughter, your friend in that manner, would you remain silent? Still, no response. Kyle appeared to be about to speak, as if he had a clever retort prepared. However, only a tense jaw and narrowed eyes were visible. Bryce moved again. Listen, man, nobody intends to provoke a conflict here. Terrence nodded, seeming to reconsider. Lauren, the gym manager, who was in her mid-30s with a blonde ponytail and a name tag, approached from behind the front desk. She moved deliberately, appearing somewhat apprehensive. It seemed she anticipated complaints and was carefully assessing the situation. Is everything okay here? She inquired, her gaze shifting between the men. Terrence responded, just clearing something up. Kyle interjected, this dude thinks he can tell us what to say to people now. Lauren observed him, then the woman who remained near the barbell. She understood, perhaps not immediately, but sufficiently. Well, she stated cautiously, we don't permit harassment here. If anyone feels disrespected, that is something we must address seriously. Bryce laughed dismissively. Harassment? He remarked. We said one thing, he added. Terrence interjected. That was enough. A silence followed. Then, Lauren slowly turned toward the young woman. Are you all right? She inquired. The woman rose, silent but composed. She stated she was only here to exercise. Lauren affirmed, understood. You are welcome here. Please inform us if you encounter any further issues. And that concluded the interaction. The atmosphere didn't ease with a significant event. There was no altercation, no theatrical display, no commendation. However, a change occurred. Bryce and Kyle shared a glance. Subsequently, without further conversation, they departed toward the locker room, speaking quietly to themselves. No one intervened. It wasn't necessary. Terrence turned and made eye contact with the woman. She offered him a slight nod, a gesture of thanks without speaking. More impactful than the interaction itself was the stillness, the expressions, and the way others seemed to shrink in that instant. He repeatedly considered what the outcome would have been if he hadn't been present. However, the day continued, and the narrative began to spread beyond the gym. Terrence was in the process of filling his water bottle at the fountain when he detected a voice coming from behind him. A sense of triumph seemed to fill him. He didn't turn around immediately. He recognized the voice. It was Kyle, that familiar mocking tone, now without a crowd, sounding less assertive, more intimate. Terrence quietly replaced the cap on his bottle before turning to face him. Kyle stood alone, his arms hanging loosely, the sharpness in his features softened, replaced by what appeared to be wounded pride. Perhaps embarrassment, maybe simply the annoyance of not having the final say. I'm not here to be a hero, Terrence stated. I came here to exercise, just like everyone else. Kyle moved nearer. You reacted excessively over a minor incident. She hadn't expressed any concerns. You intervened as if she required assistance. Terrence subtly supported himself against the wall, maintaining his composure. She didn't need rescuing, but she shouldn't have been ridiculed either. You deliberately made her feel uneasy. Kyle made a dismissive sound. So now you're the guardian of feelings. Terrence inclined his head. It was simply a grown man weary of witnessing individuals feigning acceptance of public displays of erratic behavior. Kyle's jaw tightened. You don't know me, and you don't know her, Terrence responded. But that didn't prevent him from speaking. There was a pause, a genuine one, where Kyle remained motionless, blinking, as if a portion of him wasn't accustomed to anyone challenging without shouting or striking. Just statements, simply a reflection. Then Kyle surveyed his surroundings. The hallway adjacent to the locker rooms was silent. Just them and a low hum of a treadmill belt nearby. You people always got to make it racial, he muttered. Terrence felt it. That shift, that old tired line, meant to flip the blame, meant to derail. He kept his voice steady. You brought race into it when you thought she was an easy target. You thought nobody would say anything. That's not on me. Kyle didn't answer. I've been in places like this all my life, Terrence went on, and I know when something's just a joke. When a situation arose involving asserting dominance, Terrence remained silent. Then Kyle exhaled sharply and mumbled, whatever, man. As he turned towards the locker room, Terrence observed him leave, then subtly shook his head. It wasn't a reaction of anger, nor of triumph, but of understanding. He had no desire to cause humiliation. He didn't require a public victory. The crucial aspect was that he had been heard, that Kyle, even if unwilling to acknowledge it, recognized it. And at that moment, a voice spoke behind him, quieter this time. It was the young woman. She had changed her shirt, with her hoodie pulled halfway over her head. Thank you, she said, her voice almost a whisper for saying something. Terrence gave a small smile. You're welcome. I didn't know what to do, she added. I just froze. That's okay, he said. You don't owe anyone a reaction. That's the thing nobody tells you. Sometimes just making it through moments like that is enough. She nodded. I'm Janelle, she said to Terrence. They shook hands. Do you come here often? She inquired, with a slight amusement at how predictable it seemed. 3 times a week, he stated, in the morning before work. She responded with a smile. It appears I will begin arriving early as well. Then, she proceeded towards the exit. There were no tears, no dramatic display of emotion. Simply a moment of quiet understanding between 2 individuals who now had a shared experience. However, as that phase concluded, another development had already begun to unfold beyond the gym's confines. By the time Terrence arrived home that evening, the children were already partially through dinner. Sonia, his wife, balanced a laptop on her knee while guiding their youngest through spelling homework, as was typical for a weekday. It reminded him that everyday life continues regardless of significant events that occurred earlier. However, the burden persisted as he entered. He attempted to shed it at the gym, to release it while driving. But such experiences don't always remain where they originate. They travel with you, subtly. How was the gym? Sonia inquired while serving mashed potatoes for their son, Caleb. Terrence paused. It was peculiar, actually, that prompted her to look up, her eyebrows raised. He recounted everything to her. He presented only the facts, without embellishment or exaggeration. What Kyle and Bryce had said, how no one intervened initially, and how he ultimately did. He described Janelle's reaction, the discomfort, and the ensuing silence. Sonia listened intently, chewing deliberately and maintaining eye contact. Upon his completion, she leaned back and released a breath through her nose. It's the typical situation, she remarked, not dismissively, but with a weary tone, a recognizable tiredness. I understand, Terrence responded. However, something about today felt different. Do you mean the fact that you were the sole person to comment? She inquired. Yes, that, and he hesitated. I observed how many people listened and remained silent. Because that's often the way things unfold, she stated, rising to rinse a plate. People avoid involvement. They desire to prevent uncomfortable moments. They're apprehensive about speaking up and becoming entangled. Some believe it's not their concern. He nodded slowly. It shouldn't be typical, he thought. It shouldn't, she replied in agreement. However, It was later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was still, when Terrence checked his phone. Alerts appeared from a local Facebook group he followed, Knoxville Fit Life Community. A post detailed the event. Saw something crazy at Ironworks today. A man stood up for a woman being teased by two guys at the squat rack. There was no violence, just a direct challenge, which is commendable. The post already had over 100 comments. Some users expressed praise for the individual. Others inquired about the situation. A few responded with predictable reactions. The complete details are unknown. It seems people are easily offended these days. Humor is no longer tolerated. Terrence did not participate in the discussion. He simply observed it unfold. A short clip was even posted, a shaky, 3-second phone video showing him standing in front of Kyle and Bryce, his back to the camera. A still image depicts a man steadfastly remaining in place. He felt uncomfortable being the focus of attention, not due to shame, but because it diverted focus from the core message. The intention was for the discussion to highlight how easily inappropriate actions can go unnoticed if no one speaks up. The following morning at the gym, the atmosphere had shifted. Janelle was present again. This time, she offered him a fist bump, her face displaying a friendly smile as if they had been gym companions for years. People observed without negativity. Several individuals nodded in his direction, a gesture of understanding rather than attention-seeking. Lauren, the gym manager, approached him discreetly once he concluded a set. "Hey," she began, "thank you again for yesterday." He turned to face her. "We're experienced previous difficulties," she explained, with people voicing sentiments they perceive as benign. "This time, discussions are occurring about it. Perhaps it will bring about a change." "Maybe," he responded. Just as he reached for his towel, a man from the back, appearing to be in his mid-60s, with a wiry build and gray in his beard, approached. "I was here yesterday," he stated. Terrence raised an eyebrow. "Yes," the man confirmed. He paused, then added, "I didn't say anything then. Should have. I have 2 granddaughters. I often think if that were one of them, I want someone like you close by." Terrence remained silent for a moment. Then the man offered a half smile and said, "Appreciate that. My name's Roland. If you ever need a place to stay, I'm around." Terrence hadn't anticipated who would enter next, and the words he would speak. Terrence hadn't expected anyone in particular when the gym doors opened late that Friday afternoon. But there he was, Bryce. No caile, no savagir, no smirk. Just a man walking in with headphones around his neck and something in his eyes that hadn't been there previously. Terrence noticed him the moment he entered. He was uncertain whether Bryce would disregard him, attempt a confrontation, or act as if the previous day hadn't occurred. However, Bryce did not feign indifference. Instead, he approached Terrence directly after he completed his warm-up set on the lat pull-down machine. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than it had been previously. "Do you have a minute?" Terrence hesitated before responding. He maintained his grip on the machine's handle, carefully observing Bryce's expression for any indication of mockery. He detected none. "All right," Terrence finally said. Bryce shifted his weight, restless. "I spoke with Kyle," he started. "He believes you intentionally embarrassed us. He's still upset, but—" Terrence remained silent. "I have 2 sons," Bryce continued, aged 10 and 8. "They were at the park recently. I observe an older boy teasing them. Nothing serious, just provoking them. And I understood. I felt paralyzed. I didn't know how to react. I simply watched." He hesitated. "I recalled my silence during that incident with the girl. We were certainly behaving poorly, and Terrence observed it." "Now what?" "You were right," Bryce stated, his gaze unwavering. "I don't want to be that person, not for my children and not for my own sake." Terrence shifted back a little. "It's not about being correct. It's about recognizing when to cease being the individual you'd avoid encountering." Bryce affirmed. They stood in silence for a moment. Just 2 men in gym clothes, under fluorescent lights, speaking as if the conversation held significance. "I'm not going to apologize for Kyle," Bryce stated. "He's got his own things to sort out. But I do apologize for my words, for my behavior." Terrence extended his hand. "I accept that," they said, shaking hands firmly, briefly, genuinely. Later that evening, Terrence sat on the porch with his daughter, Elise, who just turned 14 and had recently taken an interest in running. She inquired about what occurred at the gym. She remembered hearing her mom briefly mention something earlier. He paused, then recounted the events. He presented the information directly, without minimizing its impact. He described the conversation, the quiet moments, the disagreement, and the subsequent apology. He observed her reaction as he spoke, noting the shifts in her expression with each detail. "So you simply spoke with them?" She questioned, lifting her eyebrows. "Yes," he replied. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't create a disturbance. I simply asked them why they believed that type of conduct was acceptable. Did that have an effect? It didn't produce immediate changes, but perhaps it prompted reflection. That's frequently how shifts begin." Elise glanced at her sneakers, fiddling with the laces. "I'm not sure I would have the courage to say something like that," she whispered. Terrence smiled. "The interesting aspect is you don't feel courageous when you do it. You simply feel that someone needs to." She looked up at him, her eyes gentle, yet containing something else now. "Perhaps pride." "I will try," she said softly. "You don't need to do anything special," he responded. "Just pay attention. When something doesn't feel right, don't ignore it. Speak up if you can, or be there for someone who can't." They sat in silence for a while afterward. There was no need to fill the space, just the kind of silence that felt substantial instead of vacant. But Monday was approaching, and someone unexpected still had something to say before this story would feel complete. Monday morning began as any other. Terrence parked his usual spot, swiped his gym card at the front desk, and proceeded to the free weights. He anticipated a routine start to the week, nothing out of the ordinary. Then he noticed him. Roland, the older man who had spoken to him a few days prior, was positioned by the dumbbell rack, stretching his shoulders as if preparing for an extensive set. However, today he wasn't in workout clothes. He wore jeans, boots, and a dark jacket zipped up halfway. He wasn't here to train. He was waiting. "Got a minute?" Roland inquired, glancing up as Terrence neared. Terrence affirmed, and they walked towards the small lounge area near the vending machines. The gym was still, and few noticed them. Roland clasped his hands together, appearing hesitant. "I've been considering what occurred," he finally stated. "What you did, what you said." Terrence remained silent. Roland added, "I'm 66. I've witnessed a great deal in my years. I spent my childhood in Ohio during the 60s. My father owned a tire shop. We weren't wealthy, but we managed. I recall the time the schools integrated. I remember the underlying stress. However, we never discussed it at home." He paused. "And because of that lack of discussion, I felt unprepared when difficult situations arose. I would witness events, both at work and around town, and would tell myself, well, that's not my concern, believing silence equated to neutrality. It became clear later that it was not the case." Terrence listened, remaining silent. Roland's voice lowered a little. "The day you spoke to those men, I was present. I was 2 benches away. I heard everything." Terrence nodded slowly, "And I assumed you noticed. I felt compelled to intervene. I truly did, but I couldn't speak. I remained motionless." He reacted with a shake of his head, "And I'm still regretting it." Terrence moved closer. "You are here now. That has value." Roland exhaled. "I have grandchildren, 2 girls and 1 boy. The girls are of mixed heritage. My daughter married a black man, a good guy who teaches 6th grade. I often think about them. If they had been in that gym and someone had spoken to them in that manner, I would want someone like Terrence present, someone who wouldn't remain silent." The room felt different now, not negatively, simply more substantial. "I've expressed sentiments in the past that I regret," Roland admitted. "I've allowed certain things to go unaddressed that I shouldn't have, but I am striving to improve. That's why I came today, to offer my gratitude, and to assure you that I will speak up in the future." No more hesitation. Terrence finally smiled. That meant more than you probably realize. They shook hands again. This one felt different. Not a gesture of thanks, but a recognition of a new understanding. "I might even start working out again," Roland added with a chuckle. Terrence grinned. "Start with light weights. Don't go breaking something." They both laughed, and the tension in the air finally eased. Following Roland's departure, Terrence stood near the mirror wall, a towel draped over his shoulder, and observed the room for a brief moment. It was the same gym with the same walls. Yet it felt altered, not due to any sudden improvement in everyone's abilities, nor because of the eradication of racism, but because of a subtle change. One person spoke, another listened, a third reconsidered their perspective. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it represented a difference. And sometimes, a small difference is enough to initiate progress. Even with everything, the true understanding didn't come until Terrence saw what his daughter posted later that night. It was approximately 9:30 when Terrence finally sat down on the edge of his bed. Shoes kicked off, lights dimmed, the soft hum of the hallway fan in the background. Sonia was reading, legs curled under the blanket, her glasses sliding down her nose. He grabbed his phone to check a few messages before bed, and that's when he saw a new post from Elise. He clicked. It was a selfie. An ordinary picture, her hair pulled back, no filter, wearing her school hoodie. But it was the caption that stopped him. My dad stood up for a stranger this week. He didn't yell, he didn't throw hands, he just spoke up. And that was enough to make people think, including me. I used to believe keeping quiet made you neutral, but I was wrong. Silence has side. I hope I'm brave like him when it matters. Terrence stared at the screen, not because he was surprised by the message, but because it was so confident and direct. It had come from his teenage daughter, the one who used to feel anxious requesting ketchup from a server, the one who once cried when she had to recite a poem in front of her class. And now she was sharing words like that publicly. He glanced at Sonia and gave her the phone. She read it quietly, then smiled without looking up. You seem to notice she's observing your actions, don't you? Terrence sighed. I'm mostly just attempting to make it through the week. She responded, setting the phone down on the nightstand. You're managing better than that. He reclined, gazing at the ceiling, allowing the feeling to linger. Everything that transpired in the last few days, Kyle, Bryce, Janelle, Roland, Elise, all began with a single choice. Not a significant one, not a sensational one. Simply a decision to speak instead of remaining silent. That was all. That recollection remained with him profoundly. People often assume that taking a stand requires fearlessness, but that isn't the reality. Frequently, one experiences fear and doubt. There's a reluctance to create awkwardness. Yet, remaining silent has consequences for others. He recalled Janelle's expression when she described feeling paralyzed. He remembered Roland's nervous habit of rubbing his hands together as he confessed his uncertainty about what to do. He recalled Bryce struggling to express regret without appearing vulnerable. And he mused, this is the beginning. Not with elaborate pronouncements, not with online condemnation, but in tangible locations with genuine individuals who opt for the somewhat more challenging course of action. The subsequent morning, Terrence paused in his vehicle within the gym parking lot prior to entering, not to prepare himself, simply to contemplate. Afterward, he retrieved his phone and composed a message. It wasn't intended for widespread dissemination. The goal wasn't validation, it was simply sharing a truth. Significant impact doesn't require a grand gesture. It involves acknowledging injustice and speaking out, regardless of fear or isolation. That's where progress begins. He published the message and exited the vehicle. It was another Monday, another workout, but with a feeling of lightness he hadn't experienced previously. Many people have experienced moments similar to those described. If you've hesitated in the past, remember you have future opportunities. The important consideration is, in those future instances, how will you respond? Speak out, even when it causes discomfort, even if the matter seems minor. Because remaining silent may preserve your ease, but it won't safeguard another's dignity. And someone close to you may be awaiting a voice such as yours. Should this story have struck a chord, please share it and leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe, as we have additional stories exploring the true meaning of doing what's right. According to my mom, she works at NASA. The entire class laughed until someone with a badge entered the room and altered the atmosphere. It was a Tuesday, shortly after recess, and the classroom had a subtle scent of hand sanitizer and pencil shavings. Ms. Lawson had just finished roll call when she clapped her hands and announced, All right, it's time for our What My Parent Does presentations. One after another, students share their stories. A father who worked as a firefighter, a mother employed a local bakery, a brother serving in the army who was acknowledged with a round of applause, even though technically he didn't count. Next came Talia Jefferson's introduction. She rose deliberately, clutching a small index card displaying her name in purple ink. Talia was known as one of the quieter students in class. She was intelligent but preferred not to raise her hand simply to speak. She surveyed the room, making no direct eye contact, and stated distinctly, "My mom works at NASA." A pause followed. Then came quiet chuckles, escalating into laughter, not a sudden outburst, but a wave that grew stronger as confused and amused glances circulated. "Wait, NASA?" Someone called from the rear. "You mean like the space agency?" Another voice whispered, perhaps a little too loudly. Even Ms. Lawson seemed surprised. She didn't laugh. Instead, her eyebrows rose a little, as if she found it difficult to accept. Talia blinked deliberately, remaining silent and still. She didn't shout. She didn't flee. She simply stood, her expression composed, her hands unwavering. "Yes," she confirmed, stating that she works at NASA and is a systems engineer. The word seemed out of place. Ms. Lawson, positioned close to the board, offered a strained smile, signaling a transition to the next item. "Well, thank you, Talia," she said, already looking over her clipboard. Next, it was Owen's turn. Talia resumed her seat, disregarding the laughter and the subtle gestures. Her fingers tightened around the bottom of her shirt. Her expression remained composed, though her cheeks felt flushed. Owen began to discuss his dad's plumbing business, but Talia registered very little of what he said. She was certain they didn't accept her story, not a single one of them, not even the teacher. They found the task unbelievable, but even more so, they doubted the individual presenting it. A girl with deep brown skin, her tight braids secured with a soft pink scrunchie. She carried a hand-me-down backpack with a broken zipper. Her shoes were well worn, and she didn't use elaborate language or speak with great volume. Therefore, when she mentioned NASA, it sounded to them like a fantasy, like a game. During Owen's presentation, a piece of paper was passed to her desk. A boy named Theo leaned towards her and asked if she cleaned the bathrooms or something. Talia remained silent. She didn't cry, not at that moment. As the bell signaled the end of class and students scrambled for their backpacks, she remained seated, her gaze fixed on the classroom door. She had never before wished her mom held a different position, one that was simpler to discuss, one that didn't invite curious glances. Nevertheless, even then, she held onto the conviction that it was important. Her mom had once shared with her that some truths are too profound for limited understanding. One simply allows them to mature. Talia exited that classroom with her head held high, despite a knot in her stomach. She felt no personal shame. Her concern was for those around her. However, she was unaware that the learning experience wasn't complete. This applied to her classmates and to Ms. Lawson as well. The Jefferson house was located close to a peaceful road in Mobile, Alabama. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was neat, painted a light yellow with green shutters. It was the sort of place where the porch light was consistently illuminated before nightfall, and the screen door made a slight creak upon entry. Talia entered through that door at a slower pace than normal. Removing her sneakers, she dropped her backpack close to the staircase and went directly to the kitchen. The aroma of garlic and onions indicated her mom had arrived home earlier than usual. Dr. Renee Jefferson was at the stove, stirring something in a large red pot. She didn't immediately acknowledge her. "You're late," she stated, not unkindly, simply observing it. Talia selected a chair and sat down. "Had to remain behind to clean the desks," she murmured. Renee turned, observed her daughter's expression, and adjusted the flame. Talia remained silent for a moment. Her hands rested in her lap, nervously playing with the sleeves of her hoodie. She appeared eager to speak, but struggled to begin. "We laughed," Talia said at last. Renee understood immediately who she meant. She drew out the chair opposite her daughter and sat. There were no outbursts, no displays of shock or fear. "Why? I informed them that you were employed at NASA. Renee gave a barely perceptible nod, and they didn't believe you. One kid suggested you might have cleaned the bathrooms. Renee took a shallow breath, a momentary pause to compose herself. And what was your response? You didn't offer one. Ms. Lawson quickly moved on, seemingly avoiding the issue. That action caused Renee's eyebrows to twitch almost imperceptibly, but she maintained a level tone. Do you think you said something incorrect? Talia glanced up sharply. No. Don't accept their lack of understanding as your fault. They laughed. And that's their responsibility, not yours. A moment of silence followed as the bubbling from the pot filled the space. Outside, a dog barked twice and then stopped. You know, Renee said, rising to stir the food again, when I first told people I wanted to work in aerospace, my high school guidance counselor told me to be more realistic. Said I should consider secretarial work. Talia looked up, eyes wide. That occurred in 1998. I didn't engage in an argument with her. I simply ceased visiting her office. Did it cause pain? Renee extinguished the stove and turned to her daughter. Yes, but also ignited a spark. I wasn't feeling anger towards her. I was resolved not to allow her to dictate who I could be. Talia smiled. Just a little. She appreciated that her mom consistently found a way to speak honestly, but not in a sensationalized way. There was resilience in her composure. You know, I could attend your class, Renee mentioned casually. Parent days are this Friday, correct? Talia blinked. You do that? She asked. I get the day off anyway, and it might be fun. Renee replied, but what would you wear? Talia's eyes lit up. Renee grinned. I was thinking maybe my NASA badge and that black blazer you hate. Talia responded, okay, yeah, do that. They both laughed then, a real, from-the-belly kind of laughter. The air in the kitchen felt lighter. Renee served them both bowls of stew and set them on the table. While they ate, she shared stories with Talia about her first job interview and the time she accidentally spilled coffee on a flight simulator keyboard. The stories made Talia giggle, and she no longer felt small. She felt lucky. Remember, Renee said as they finished, you don't owe anyone proof. But if the moment comes when you feel like showing them, just know I've got your back. Talia nodded slowly, cheeks full of food and her badge. Renee smirked that too. She wasn't intending to simply make a statement. She aimed to transform the atmosphere of the room. Talia hadn't realized this yet. Friday arrived sooner than Talia anticipated. Throughout the entire week, rumors continued to circulate within the classroom, much like dust in sunlight. Several students attempted apologies through hesitant gestures. One offered her a crushed fruit snack. Another quietly said, I was just joking. However, the majority behaved as if nothing had occurred. This suited Talia just fine. She hadn't forgotten. As the morning bell signaled the start of the day, the classroom was filled with excited energy. Ms. Lawson had organized the desks in a horseshoe shape, creating space for parents to be seated and present. She wore a purple blouse and had placed a tray of sugar cookies, clearly purchased from a grocery store, as a somewhat feeble attempt to create a celebratory atmosphere. Talia was positioned near the center, her backpack carefully placed beneath her chair. She felt anxious, though not frightened. It was a feeling of anticipation. She had not informed anyone that her mom would be present. The first parents arrived approximately at 9:15. This included a man wearing a mechanic's uniform, a woman in scrubs, and several moms carrying tote bags and Starbucks cups, who greeted with somewhat overenthusiastic smiles and waves. The presentation commenced, punctuated by applause and gentle laughter. One dad shared a story about repairing a sink that had unexpectedly burst. Another mom recounted her experience of teaching yoga to toddlers. Talia repeatedly looked toward the door. Precisely as Ms. Lawson began introducing the subsequent speaker, the door opened. Dr. Renee Jefferson entered the room. She was wearing the black blazer that Talia found so off-putting, perfectly tailored and crisp. Her NASA Johnson Space Center identification badge hung from a Navy lanyard, paired with black slacks and no jewelry except for a silver watch. Her expression was calm, not smug, not flashy, simply present. The room fell silent instantly. Even the air seemed to still. Ms. Lawson stammered, and Talia stood up, announcing, "This is my mom, Dr. Renee Jefferson." The teacher's eyes widened momentarily before a smile spread across their face. All right, welcome. They gestured. Would you like to tell us about your work? Renee responded with a courteous nod. Certainly. Good morning, everyone. I'm an aerospace systems engineer at NASA. I work on mission planning, flight systems integration, and operation strategy for our lunar and Mars programs. Several heads turned in the direction of Talia. A few mouths dropped open, and one student quietly whispered, "Whoa." Renee proceeded calmly. Her voice had a measured cadence, clear, smooth, and steady. A significant portion of my work focuses on designing systems that ensure astronauts can travel safely in space. We examine all aspects, from their respiration to the transmission of data back to Earth. She paused, allowing the statement to sink in. I'm not here to impress you, she added, observing the room. I came here because my daughter mentioned she's spoken with you, and some of you expressed doubt about my work. Silence. Talia could hear her own heartbeat. She refused to blink. Renee approached the whiteboard and indicated a printed diagram she had prepared, a genuine schematic from a previous project. You don't need to grasp every detail. That's perfectly acceptable, she stated, addressing the group. But the next time you hear something that seems unbelievable, pause before dismissing it. Because innovation can emerge unexpectedly, she said, then turned to her daughter. And when someone shares a truth with conviction, allow it to remain as it is, don't diminish it. Ms. Lawson cleared her throat. Thank you, Dr. Jefferson. That was very enlightening. Renee smiled and walked over to sit beside Talia, who was trying not to grin. The room proceeded slowly after that. The next parent began their presentation about running a car dealership. There was no laughter, no whispering. And Talia, she sat up straighter than she ever had before. She didn't look around for affirmation. She didn't require it. At that moment, her truth resonated strongly, accessible to all present. However, many failed to recognize that the woman they had just encountered hadn't always experienced being heard. Her journey to NASA encompassed countless instances mirroring this one. Prior to becoming Dr. Renee Jefferson, she was simply Renee Lewis, a slender teenager with oversized glasses and notebooks filled with diagrams that held no interest for anyone else in her neighborhood. Growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, she lived in a house with a sagging front porch, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs to pay the bills. From a young age, she preferred machines to makeup. While other girls enjoyed playing jump rope, Renee constructed small devices from discarded fans and obsolete cassette players. Her uncle once described her as odd, but she viewed that as a positive attribute. At 13, she borrowed a book from the public library about space shuttles and devoured it completely in a single night. By 14, she was independently learning fundamental programming concepts. She rarely discussed this at school. She quickly discovered that expressing a desire to work at NASA would often result in ridicule or dismissal. Her educators didn't encourage her. This wasn't due to a lack of intelligence. Renee consistently earned straight A's across all subjects. Instead, they had formed preconceived notions about her future. You'd be exceptionally organized, one counselor remarked to her. You'd excel as a receptionist. Upon mentioning her intention to apply to a summer program for young engineers at Georgia Tech, her math teacher expressed surprise. He remarked that it was highly competitive and questioned if she was certain about spending the application fee. Despite this, she submitted her application and was accepted. That summer proved transformative. She found herself among peers who approached problem solving in a similar manner, with notebooks brimming with questions and uninhibited curiosity. She returned with a collection of blueprints and a newfound sense of purpose. College presented its own challenges. At Auburn University, she found herself one of just 3 black women within the entire engineering department. During collaborative assignments, she frequently was asked to record notes rather than work on calculations. Instructors continued to mispronounce her name, even after 3 semesters had passed. Despite these difficulties, she remained steadfast, consistently attending classes. Renee supported herself by working evenings at a diner close to campus and providing tutoring services to high school students on weekends. There were moments when she contemplated abandoning her studies. It wasn't a matter of her inability to manage the workload. The difficulties stemmed from the draining effort of constantly having to demonstrate her place. During one spring, following a successful thermodynamics midterm, she overheard two classmates speaking privately behind her. One suggested she must have received assistance, and the other speculated she may have copied from another student. Instead of confronting them, she didn't shed tears. She simply returned home, opened her textbook, and began preparing for the upcoming finals. By the semester's conclusion, she achieved the top rank within her department. It was an unspoken understanding amongst them, but they recognized it. Following graduation, she completed an internship at Lockheed Martin. Subsequently, she submitted an application to NASA, which she considered a long shot. However, her qualifications were undeniable. The acceptance call arrived in March while she was in a laundromat, surrounded by wet towels and with only one dryer operational. Her mother wept on the phone for a full 5 minutes. From there, the substantial effort commenced. The meetings, the designs, the late nights, the subtle glances in conference rooms, the moments where she had to repeat herself 3 times to be heard. But she persisted in voicing her thoughts, because whenever she worked at a console or drafted a fresh concept, she recalled a younger version of herself who only needed one person to believe it was achievable. Now, as she entered her daughter's 5th grade classroom, the badge swaying from her neck, she represented more than just herself. She stood for every girl who had ever been told, "People like you don't do that." However, this wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about establishing something new in her daughter, a foundation that couldn't be undermined. The following Monday, subtle changes were noticeable, not in a dramatic fashion, but through small shifts. The shift was subtle, something you'd only perceive if you were paying close attention. When Talia entered class, she anticipated no special welcome, and none arrived, but the atmosphere felt different. People didn't visibly react when she spoke. Theo didn't whisper. In fact, he completely avoided looking at her. During recess, 2 girls, Kennedy and Samira, approached her near the jungle gym. They stood nearby, uncomfortably, shifting their weight. "My mom said your mom's speech was really something," Kennedy said, chewing her bottom lip. "She seemed intelligent, genuinely so." "She is," Talia answered promptly. Samira concurred. "I researched NASA after school," she explained. "It's quite interesting." That was their brief exchange. Yet they remained. And for the first time all year, the 3 of them settled on the bench and discussed a topic beyond snack trades or slime videos. Later that day, Ms. Lawson spoke privately with Talia as the class prepared to leave. "I wanted to say something," she began, her voice softer than normal. "Regarding last week," Talia looked up, attentive. "I should have managed that situation differently," Ms. Lawson continued. "I ought to have asked more questions rather than proceeding so quickly. I apologize." Talia wasn't certain how to respond. She rarely encountered adults offering apologies in that manner. She nodded once, deliberately. That was sufficient for the present, though not everyone experienced a change of perspective. Certain children still spoke in hushed tones, but they did so with greater discretion. Some observed her with an expectation of failure, seemingly needing her to falter to reaffirm their own perspectives. One boy, Dean, would quietly say NASA kid whenever she passed, as if attempting to diminish her accomplishments. Talia remained composed. She did not react defensively or retreat. Instead, she continued her efforts. She engaged more frequently in class, volunteering answers even when uncertain of the correctness. Now, even making mistakes didn't intimidate her, not as it once had. One afternoon during group work, she overheard a classmate say, "She thinks she's better than us." Talia looked up calmly and replied, "No, I just know I belong here." No further debate followed. At home, Renee observed the change as well. Talia spoke more at dinner, sharing small details about her day without needing to be prompted repeatedly. And she began drawing again, shifting away from cartoons towards diagrams, similar to those her mother created. Rockets, helmets, star maps, and pencil. One evening, Renee discovered a post-it note affixed to the fridge. It stated, "I'm going to work there too, love, Talia." She left it untouched for 3 days. However, this wasn't solely about demonstrating assurance. A more profound shift had occurred within Talia. It was no longer a matter of disproving anyone. It was about embracing her own authenticity, recognizing truth regardless of criticism. During gym class, when the teacher requested they write down a goal not related to sports, Talia wrote, "Engineer, space missions just like my mom." When the teacher announced it, there were no laughs. The class simply listened. However, at home, a different feeling arose. It was a still moment shared between mother and daughter, solidifying all they had experienced. It was Friday night again. A full week had passed since Parent Day, and the house was filled with the aroma of Renee's renowned lemon chicken. Talia sat at the kitchen table, sketching a new design, a rotating satellite with solar panels shaped like flower petals. She worked quietly, pausing occasionally to erase or examine an angle. Renee watched from the sink, carefully drying a dish. The focused way her daughter drew, with her tongue slightly pressed against her upper lip, brought back memories of herself at 12, always constructing something in her mind. "Would you like to take a break?" Renee asked softly. Talia looked up. "Almost finished." Renee smiled, resting against the counter. "You've been working on that for 2 hours." Talia replied, "I know, I just wanted to look right." She completed the final line and showed the paper to her mom. Renee approached and examined it closely. "Explain it to me." Talia said, "Well, it's a satellite, but instead of keeping all the panels flat, they open up like this." She demonstrated the shape with her hands, so it can collect more energy when it turns, depending on the angle of the sun. Renee acknowledged with a nod, clearly impressed. "That's a clever approach. Where did that idea originate?" Talia replied, "I'm not entirely sure. I had been considering sunflowers earlier, observing how they track the sun's movement. The concept simply arose." Renee took a seat next to her, carefully placing the paper on the table. "You know what I appreciate most about that idea?" She inquired. "What?" Renee responded. "You weren't attempting to make a favorable impression. You were simply striving to resolve an issue." Talia glanced at the drawing once more. "Yes, I suppose so." They remained there for a moment in quiet contemplation. A comfortable silence settled. Then Talia spoke again, her voice gentler. "Do you think they truly believed me?" "After you left," Renee placed her hand on the table. "Some did, some still don't. That's not something you can always manage. So what is the solution? You continue to reappear. That's the challenging aspect. Not a single time, but repeatedly. You articulate the truth, even when it seems as though nobody listens." Talia considered that as you did. Renee offered a gentle smile, similar to the one I still offer. "Was it always this difficult for you?" Renee reclined in the chair, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes more so, but I stopped expecting it to become simple." Talia regarded her mother, seeing her not only as a parent, but as an individual. Someone who had overcome obstacles she hadn't even been aware of. Someone who possessed quiet strength without needing external validation. "I used to wish you had a conventional job." Renee laughed, something straightforward to describe. Talia observed her mother's reaction, recognizing the discomfort when people inquired. "Now, I find it quite admirable, truly admirable." Renee reached out and gently tucked one of her daughter's braids behind her ear. "I'm proud of you, she said. "Not because of what you said in class, but because you said it anyway." Talia felt a warmth in her chest, not just pride, but relief. A weight she hadn't noticed until it started to lift. "I didn't think you were going to come that day," she admitted. Renee raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" she asked. "I thought maybe you'd think it wasn't worth it." Renee hesitated. Then she moved nearer, speaking with a resolute and unwavering tone. "Anything that impacts your self-perception is always deserving of support." Little needed to be said after that. Talia rose and proceeded to the refrigerator, took a magnet, and attached her artwork directly beside the grocery list. Renee observed her, feeling a sense of quiet contentment. Not every learning experience warranted recognition. Some simply existed, perceptible only to those who had rightfully gained them. There remained one final point to share, not directed at Talia, but for those still discovering what excellence resembles. The following week, during the morning announcements, Ms. Lawson took an unanticipated action. She presented a student submission from the Career Dreams bulletin board and read it aloud to the class. "This one is from Talia Jefferson," she announced. She wrote, "I want to build machines that will reach places no person has ever reached because someone must discover how to get us there, and I believe I can." There was no laughter this time, only silence. Several students turned to observe her, not with incredulity, but with something approaching respect. Talia sat at her desk, serene and concentrated, sketching miniature gears in the borders of her notebook. She didn't require a glance upward, nor did she need the room to applaud. That wasn't the focus, as this narrative was never centered on recognition. It concerned honesty, about maintaining conviction when others expressed doubt, about the significance of speaking clearly, not noisily. However, the individuals in that classroom had observed something unexpected. A woman with qualifications, certainly. Beyond that, she was a woman with a clear sense of self, someone who didn't require authorization to express herself, and a daughter who witnessed her interspaces devoid of faith and yet infused them with strength. Renee didn't need to speak loudly. She didn't need to detail her achievements. Her presence was sufficient. However, it was Talia who bore the burden of that day. She endured the flames of mockery, remained within them, and emerged stronger. It can be challenging to express self-belief, particularly when facing a lack of external validation. The core message extends beyond the nature of a parent's profession or the perceived grandeur of their role. It centers on the lessons we impart to our children, not through spoken words, but through demonstrable actions. Affirming your child instills resilience. Consistently supporting them cultivates bravery. Even a brief moment in a crowded room, standing near them, demonstrates what it truly means to be heard. When a child experiences being seen, not only by a teacher or a classmate, but by the wider world, they cease to diminish their presence. They stop doubting themselves. They begin to carry themselves with the confidence of someone who has something significant to contribute. Because they do. Talia no longer needed to persuade anyone. She wasn't waiting for the class to accept her. She had already moved forward, now concentrating on what she thought achievable. This is what makes narratives like hers significant. Because for each child who has been ridiculed, overlooked, or interrupted, there's another opportunity awaiting. A moment when the door opens, when the badge is displayed, when silence transforms into respect, and it remains with them. At the conclusion of the school year, when the class created their memory book, a page was designated most likely to. Beneath Talia's photograph, a message read, seemingly with the intention of sending something into space. She reacted with a smile, not due to the coolness of the statement, but because this time it appeared to be genuine. Therefore, the next time a child expresses a significant aspiration, refrain from immediate skepticism. Avoid limiting their potential to your current understanding. Allow them to surpass your expectations. And for parents observing this, be present, even when it feels challenging, particularly when it's truly important. Vocalize your belief in them. For more stories like this, please subscribe. These are stories that highlight true strength.